We're broadcasting from the Appleton Museum in Ocala, Florida. I'm Deborah Horvath, and I'm thrilled to be working with you on two different types of paintings today. The first one that we're going to work on, it's called a tape relief painting. That's why we'll be using the tape. That way you're able to achieve these crisp white lines throughout your painting. This painting is also an abstract painting. This one happens to kind of look like a star, but it doesn't have to look like a star. It's just various geometric shapes that are highlighted with variety of colors. You can choose just a whole different palette of colors, or if you want, you can stick with a theme of colors. That's entirely up to you, as this is your piece. In contrast to the abstract painting that we're working on, we're also going to do virtually a landscape or a realistic painting of birch trees. This is on the black background. It allows you to really see those birch trees and for them to stand up off the canvas. If you do not already have your canvas or paper, something ready with a black background, that's something that if you can get that done, it'll have the opportunity to dry before we're ready to use it. Try it on paper, and then you can always, tomorrow or another day, come back once you know this technique and you add this to the variety of things that you're learning. You can always come back. Doing it just one time that just gets you started. It's important to practice all the skills that you're learning so that you become more proficient, you become better at it. Plus, you'll learn things along the way that maybe either, well, for one thing, you all teach us all the time, and maybe we just overlooked something that you'll discover when you're doing it again. So I'm going to put this aside. I have a plain white canvas here that we're going to be working with. For materials, we're using, this is just regular painter's tape. The thing about the tape is it's made to stick, right? And we don't want it to be quite that sticky. So, okay, this is very technical. A technical tip is you take your tape and pull out a section. I'll just start with something like that. Okay, so I have my section of tape. Okay, you ready? You take it and across your clothes, your leg, I'll use my shirt, I'll use my apron. I'm, for lack of a better word, dabbing it across my clothes. And what that does is it picks up a little bit of lint so that it's not quite so sticky. Here, this piece even decided to stick to itself. You may be able to see, if you look closely, you'll see some of the lint that it's already picking up. You probably can't see that on the screen because it's very, it's very little, but still. So I'm going to just pick up some more, because this is really sticky tape, I can tell. Okay, that gives me a fair amount. I want it to stick to the canvas, but I want it to be able to pull off. I want it to stick well enough that it doesn't allow for paint to seep underneath. If it does, we have a way to fix that too. So I'm just going to take my not so sticky tape and gently, especially on the edges, make sure that it's sticking. Okay, so I have one down. I'm going to go ahead and just do several pieces across the canvas so you can get your tape and just start dabbing. Okay, I got this pretty sticky. I'm going to bring this one just down across here. Now, as you're working in your design, so right now I have just 3 large areas. 2 of them are pretty close to the same size. And this is a little bit larger, but it's not very exciting. So I'm going to keep going. When you are experimenting, doing this outside of class, try it with different sizes, try it with different materials. Okay, let's see if this is going to work here. Now I do want to make sure, as I said, I'm pressing down just on the edge, really. I just want to try to keep that paint from seeping underneath the edge here. And I see I'm just not quite to the edge. I want it to be all the way to the edge. See that space there? That's probably not quite right. So I'm just going to add this little piece so that it's all the way. There we go. So in your composition, which is the way that your painting's going to look here, the thing that's visually interesting is to have a variety of sized elements. In this case, mostly geometric elements. But that works for just about any painting. So here, we're going to make a nice small space here. Now I have kind of a central thing come in here. Of course, you don't have to do it that way. I think I'll break off from that here in just a minute, just so that it's not just one point where your eye is going to go to. Let's break this guy up right here. So as I break this space up, I'm careful to keep the tape from spilling out over the edges. I don't want to lose that edge there, because that's probably the most important thing about this whole style of painting, is that we have some crisp lines. Okay, I'm thinking maybe one or two more pieces and then I'm going to be ready to get some paint. So a lot of times when you're painting, particularly on paper, it's a trick to use tape around the outside of your paper or your canvas. That creates a border, or I was instructed that is your line of reference to keep everything within boundaries of your work. The other thing that allows is if you frame it, it allows room for a mat and a frame so that you're not overlapping into your piece, because it may not make a difference, but then again, it might. Okay, one more and then I'm ready. So everybody has some paint brushes ready, some water, a little container. I need one more little piece and then I'll be done. All right, we're all ready. I got my tape down. Now I'm starting to think about some colors. I have a selection of mostly primary colors here that I'm going to be working with, because I know if I want something like, I don't know, pink or light blue, I can blend that. If I want orange, I can easily make that color with what I have here. So I'll set that here off to the side. I'm just working with a piece of paper that is kind of waxy. That's what I'm going to use to mix my paints on and to use for my palette. Okay, I have several different sizes of brushes here. I have a nice big brush for my bigger spaces and some smaller. I'm not going to need this itty bitty brush right now. I think something maybe like that will be enough. We'll use those right there. And I'm just going to go for my big spaces first, because those are obviously going to have the biggest impact on the painting. I'm kind of a bright person. I like bright colors. So I'm going to start with yellow. And of course, you probably already know yellow is a warm color. So I'm just going to heat this painting up right off the bat with some bright yellow. I'm going to just use it straight out of the tube right now. Oops, I need to pour just a little bit of water here. I'm going to use just a minimal amount of water. I don't want to saturate that canvas. And especially if you're working on paper, you need very little water, just enough to kind of make the paint flow. So one thing that I will do to help ensure that the paint doesn't seep under the tape is, if you'll notice here, my brush strokes are going to come over the tape and away from it. I'm not going to brush towards that tape. I'm going to try to be careful to keep the strokes away from the tape so that it just doesn't have an opportunity to seep up under there. Notice like right there's a spot it could. So I'm going to be very careful not to keep my brush from going up under there. Now in my composition, and with my selection of colors, sometimes it works to the advantage of the artist and is a pleasing thing to look at. If there's just one color, it might be something that the artist might want to make a statement with just that one color. But most of the time, repeating colors, shapes, sizes to create a pattern is going to make it a pleasing composition. And when you're working with abstract, I'm sure you've all seen abstract paintings and you're like, okay, what is that? Well, the whole point is it isn't really a what. It's not a what is. The way to look at that is to observe what kind of patterns do you see? What kind of colors? What's the emotion that might be behind that painting? Here, because we're working with all angles, it certainly isn't something that's deep and well thought out. It's more playful and fun and easy to decorate a room with. Okay, I have one yellow. I feel like I need another yellow. I really like this long triangle here, so I am trying to use my brush in different directions in the center where it's not going up against that tape. And the reason for doing that is so that you get a good coverage on your canvas or even on your paper. You don't want to be able to see through that. And if you're working on canvas, of course, you have this ledge here. You might want to run some paint down there. That's up to you. It just gives it a little finished look. And if you're going to hang it, you don't even have to frame it. You can just hang it. All right, I'm good with that. I have this little dab of there we go. This little dab of yellow there, and orange is one of my favorite colors. I don't have orange, but of course I have everything I need to make some orange. Probably a little bit more yellow. So when I'm going to make this orange, I always want to start with yellow, and I'm going to add just the smallest amount of red. It is a very strong color and it'll overtake that orange before you know it. Orange there that I think it's toned down enough. I'm not going to add any white to it. I'm going to use it just like that. So I have this nice smaller square over here. Again, I'm pulling away from the canvas right up to it, but pulling away from it. And I can see here for sure that I need probably to carefully overlap these brush strokes because I can see the canvas through this color. Go ahead and get the edge here real quick. I'm not so concerned about the edge, but just to give it a finish. Okay, especially here in the middle, I want to make sure I have that paint evenly applied. Again, working away from my tape edge towards the center and then doing some cross strokes. I think what I'll do is let this dry just a little bit as I move on to another area. I'm going to turn my canvas around. This area here will frame that yellow. From my experience, it can make it a little more difficult to pull off. And I really am looking to get paint on my canvas, but ultimately it doesn't really matter. I have a little orange left there. So if I choose, I can always come back and add another layer here because with something with acrylic paint, if you just keep swiping over it, it's going to start removing the paint and I want the coverage. So I'm going to let that dry a little bit. I can just use another brush even so that I can get some more color on there. So I don't know if you can see there, but from my perspective, I can see where the canvas is showing through. Okay, so I have a good start here. Now looking ahead to, I don't want to keep it, I don't think I'm going to go for the like all warm color thing. I'd like to bring in some cool colors as well. And certainly with yellow already here, if I bring in blue and green, I'm still kind of sticking within a central theme. And that orange gives me a little burst of a complementary color. So let's see what this blue is going to look like. Okay, that's pretty dark. So I think I need to lighten that blue up a bit. Okay, I think that is, it kind of complements in the same hue as the orange here. So I think that might just work. And I'm drawn to this large square right here. Triangle here. Let's just get her done. just go with this one. Oh, I got a little yellow on my brush. This one blue. Yeah, I think I'll do that. Now I have yellow on my brush, so I am going to need to rinse this brush out. And I happen to have a green. Of course, I could make green, but let's just see what this green is like. I noticed right away that this paint is a little different. Sometimes different colors or they just respond differently. Okay, guys, so in the interest of time, I am going to get my triangles, my elements, my areas painted so it has an opportunity to dry so we can lift some of this tape and see what's happening. Absolutely. It really is an ideal project because anybody can do this. Plus, it just helps you become more familiar with applying paint onto the surface. Well, and really, you can get a large size canvas, and it is a very inexpensive, very cost effective way to make some original art. So I'll finish this later. I know I have some dry areas over here. So I'm going to try this tape piece here is kind of not connected much with anything else. So I'm going to try to lift this one first. I'm being kind of cautious and pulling it up so I don't pull off any paint. Now, when I get to this right here, I can tell this tape is buried under there. So I might just have to kind of tear it. There, so I can remove this piece. And it was stuck under this one here, it looks like. So you can see how crisp this line is here. This is tape still. If it's not real crisp, I can always take white paint and very carefully add a little bit of white paint in this area. So if it seeps under, we'll see if I find any areas where it's seeped under. I'm going to leave these two pieces here because this is really wet right there. It's something I would encourage you, try it again. Who knows, maybe you can make some paintings for somebody in your family. Yeah, I would agree. Best part of this project is taking the tape off. It's kind of a ooh moment. Oh, I better leave that because I'm not done there. So I will leave this just like this. So here is my almost completed. If you'll take a moment and just make sure your brushes are nice and clean because we're going to work predominantly with white. Now my canvas has already been painted black, so I'm ready to go with that. Now we'll be using birch trees for our subject matter. So we have our black canvas, and I have the example of the painting here. A couple of the things that we will want to try to achieve while we're working on this is to have a couple different sizes of trunks. So in mostly the center area here, we have two larger, more predominant trunks. That definitely would be like the focal point here in the painting. They are the ones that are closest to us. That's how we achieve that illusion, is by making them larger. They appear to come closer to us. And then we have a couple more. Now they could just be smaller trees, but they also create the illusion that they are going back away from us. I'll go ahead and just paint a white canvas black. So I have a broader brush here. I don't need to worry about anything other than covering as much area as I possibly can. And one of the things that I would encourage you to do is work in from the sides and cross over your paint. By doing that, it allows better, darker, more thorough coverage. And since we want it to be black, we don't want that white canvas to show through. Doing that will help us achieve that. It might also just be a good time to take a moment and cover the edges. It probably will just look more finished if those edges are black as well. You could just put the paint right on the canvas, but I'm going to go ahead and keep it off to the side. And if I need more, I'll get it. Okay, I need just a dab of water. Again, I don't want to saturate this paint. I really want it to be as black as it can be. I'm going to pull in from the edges. I can do it pretty quickly. Of course, it helps having a nice big brush to do it with. In most cases, unless that's really what you want to achieve, we do have some very famous painters that liked having that thickness, but in most cases, it's going to serve you best if you work with a lighter hand, to use a lighter layer of paint. And then if you need to, go back over it. Especially for this project, we don't really want to have chunks of paint on the surface, because when we paint over it, it's going to affect what we're painting. As I'm working here, I'm pulling that paint out. I don't want it to have a particular thickness anywhere. I'm mostly just interested in covering it. And again, like I said, I mentioned, I'm trying to get the edges here just so it has a finished appearance. Some tips on how to cover that canvas so that it's not thick paint. There might be a temptation just to take some paint and squirt it on the middle of the canvas and move it around. Pulling this in from the edge of the painting in towards the center. Okay, I think I just about got this. And I'm just double checking here. It doesn't appear that I have any particular thickness anywhere, because I don't want that. I want a nice coverage across the whole canvas. Yep, I'd say we're good. Okay, again, we're going to use one of our black canvases today, and the rest of the week we'll use two more black canvases. All right, we're going to set this aside. so it can dry. And of course, later this week, we'll use it. Yes, if you've got your canvas, if you don't have canvas and you're using paper, I would just suggest let's use it as an opportunity to practice sketching. That certainly is something that any artist would do all the time. So this, as we had seen in the example, we have two pieces that are two trunks rather that are closest to us, a couple pieces that are more into the forest. We don't really need to see, it's a dark night. It's a full moon. It almost could be a little scary of an evening there, but we'll add the moon last. And the first thing that we're going to do, I'm going to work on the canvas with a white pencil. I'm hoping that'll give you a visual of what I'm going to do. When you're doing a drawing, whether you're doing hair or feathers, or in this case, a tree, your brush strokes or your pencil strokes should go in the same fashion that it grows. So I'm going to start at the bottom of my canvas and I'm going to come up. I don't have to be careful to make it a real straight line. As a matter of fact, I'm kind of stopping myself so that I don't get a straight line. Trees generally, palm tree might be pretty straight up and down, but most trees are not. And then I'm going to have my thicker branches or trunk here to the front. So this will be a thicker tree. But one thing that happens is as my tree grows upward, it also gets a little thinner. So I have carefully tried to make sure that the trunk is thinner or thicker than the rest of the tree as it grows up. Now this one, I just happened to add just a little visual branch right here so that I remember to add some of those. I can just put, remember we're going to paint this, so I can put a few more in here if I wish. Now these trees, we're really observing them from a close angle because it could be that it is winter here and there are no leaves, or it could be just our vantage point where we're viewing it from, that there are no leaves visible. I have some branches that are going right off the edge of the canvas here. I'm going to have another one coming out here. This is just a guideline for me. And when I have these branches, they don't just stick out one stick from the side. There's a little thickness where it grows out. And then again, it becomes thinner as it grows out to the tip. So we'll have this one here. This one's going to be a little thinner because it is going to be in the background. I can always come back to it and add many more branches. I'm going to try to show you here with the pencil because these trees are in front. This tree is behind. I'm going to have a branch that comes out and it's going to go behind. Okay, so I have my basic two trunks, two trees that are closer, two that are a little pushed back. I have 4 total. Just a nice balanced 4. I went ahead and just put in a little moon, a little full moon up in the sky so that I remember to bring that in later. If I choose, once I get going on my painting and I feel like I need some other little trees further back, I can go ahead and do that then. Okay, so I have a basic idea of what I'm going to do. So ideally, I really only need white and a tiny bit of black. I have plenty of black already here, so I don't think I need any more black. I'm just going to add some white because my birch trees are going to be in the predominantly white-ish. And I say ish because they're really not white. They're really kind of a gray, but we'll start with some white. When we are using our brush and painting, we're also going to keep in mind this curved line to give the trunks the illusion of being a little roundish. And we'll do that with our brush here as well. I'm just going to go ahead and work in the front of the painting first and get those in. So I have a little bit bigger brush that I'm going to work with because it's not going to be something that I'm going to get one brush stroke on here and then, oh, okay, that's good, that's done. I'm going to be working with a couple different size brushes so that I can get more details as I build that image up. So the first thing, I'll take my white and add a little bit of black. So that I start with some nice gray. Ooh, that might be a lot of black. Now, another important element that we probably need to decide on before we even get started. We have a moon, it's full. That moon is generating light. This moon is casting brightness on one side and a shadow on the other side. Our two main trunks here, you can see very clearly. This is much lighter here on this tree. And then on this side, the lightness is over here. And this is cast more in a shadow as the tree goes around to that side. So when I start using my brush, I'm going to try to keep that in mind. And I'm going to start with the darker side first. So a little bit gray. I can always add a little bit more black if I choose to, but I'm going to start with a little bit of gray and I'm going to pull my brush in from the side of the trunk in kind of that gentle curve. And again, remember, we do not have to be real concerned about it being like an ultra hard straight edge. This is a tree. I have my brush pretty loaded with paint here. As a matter of fact, I'm going to thin that out a little bit. I'm going to work all the way up one side here to get that into the painting. Now, as it comes out thinner, I can turn my brush. I have this nice flat brush. I can turn it so that I get a thinner limb coming out. So if I'm using a pencil, I'm going to be using a little heavier touch on this side to create those shadows and move into a lighter touch on the other side. Okay, so I've got it started. That's just a half of the trunk there. I'll come on this side as well and get that half of the trunk in there. I'm going to try to turn this a little bit so that I think you can see it a little better. There, I'm just going to be building this painting up, starting with this side. With this is, it's kind of a medium gray, I guess I would say here. Because remember, if I want to increase that shadow, I can easily add a little bit darker gray or even a little bit of black there to do that. So I'm going to just try to get these basic 4 trees in here. And my final tree over here. I still have this medium gray, and I'm going to go ahead and using the side of my brush, add in some of these little branches. Again, notice I'm starting at the base of the tree where the limb is coming in and trying to pull it up just to a little finer tip there. And if there's a little squiggle, a little wobble in the line, that's even better. I noticed my paint was getting a little thick. So if you need just a little water in there, especially as you're working into the smaller areas, add just a little bit more water. I think that's a good start there that we got. I just add a little bit more water on my brush so that I could just define some of these limbs a little bit more. So there wasn't so much thickness. And I can add a little wiggle to them. Okay, I think we're ready to add the little light to it, and then we can see where else we need a little more darkness and start adding some details. So I'm going to try to get some of this gray off my brush, because when I load it up with the next color, I don't want that color in there. But I don't think I really need to wash my brush or change it, because it's basically going to be in the same family. But I'm going to take a little bit of white paint here and add it to this gray, because now I'm going to start on the other side. I can see that we needed to lighten this up to show not only the white birch tree, but that there's light coming into the painting. It's a very light gray. At the very, very end, if we want to take a fine brush and add more nearly white, then we can do that. We might want to save the whitest for part of the moon. So I'm going to check to see if I have enough contrast here as I'm coming over. And now I'm going to blend these two colors together. Oh, I got some on my brush. I'm going to add a little bit more white to it. I want to see that contrast. There, you can see the contrast there, but I don't want to leave it like two lines like that, two distinctive lines. I need to bring that in and kind of blend these two together. The strokes of my brush here kind of lend itself to the direction that the stroke is going, to show that it has roundness to it. It is drier. I still definitely have paint on there, but not a lot. If you notice, I come back over to my palette and I take some of that excess paint off, so that when I pull it across, that it is more blending than adding paint. I don't need to add paint then per se. I just want to blend the two together. I'm working in smaller areas here because I want to be able to come back and blend that together. If I let the paint dry too much, it's not going to blend as easily. There we go. See, they're working and I can see, and you can see it just a little bit. It's like a pure, almost pure white line has been added here on the sides, probably after almost at the very, very end, like the very last thing. But even here, like we have some areas that these areas aren't perfect. That's fine. They don't have to be. And at the end, when we add these little areas that are characteristic of a birch tree, these black areas, that's going to give our tree a lot more definition and character. I'm going to move along here to this next tree. Get in some of the lighter areas. And again, it's in the painting, just like a drawing, you're building it up. It's a little different. It's a lot different. When you're coloring with crayons, you pretty much just color a space with one color. And then you're done. You move on to the next space. Well, here we're building up the image by using brush strokes and shading and different colors to achieve that. Even though they're still gray, we have lighter and darker. The illusion that you are creating by making them larger is that they're closer, and then the others are smaller. So either they're smaller trees and or they're further away from us. You want to think about drawing your tree always from the bottom. It's a growing living thing and they grow from the ground up. So that's how you're going to do your drawing. And especially in your painting, you don't need to add all of the small details right away, because you just want to have a basic idea of what's laid out here. And then if you see in your composition, well, gee, I sure wish I had another little branch going off here. Well, then add it. You can readily do that to build the elements up so that you end up with a tree that looks like a living thing. What I'm going to do here, I don't need to finish this. Okay, let's add in a moonquack. I have some white paint here. I want the light to be the whitest thing on my paper. So I'm going to just start with some white, which I have right here. And I still have some gray and a little bit of black. And you know what? I'm going to paint right over these limbs that I did, because I'm going to go back later and put them back in. I'm not going to try to draw around them. So I've got my big round circle. This is a full moon. Okay, so I've got a big white moon there. Well, it looks like a big white dot to me because I know moons are not just that away. I need to add some variety of gray in there so that I can see that the moon has some craters and has some personality in it. And what I'm going to do is I've loaded up my brush with a little bit of gray and even a tad bit of black on there. Hope not too much. And I'm just going to use the end of my brush and I'm going to dab it a little bit. The moon is textured. It has craters, right? I think I could add a little bit of darkness in there. Okay, so we have just a little bit of craterish action here, but it's a full moon and it's a super full moon, so it's very bright. So I'm not going to take away from that brightness, but there's one other critical element, critical to a birch tree, and we don't want to forget it. So I'm going to show you two different ways that you can do this element in the birch tree, and that is, so on your birch tree, the element that I want to point out are these black lines. It just is what makes a birch tree look like a birch tree. It's part of the way their bark is. And it's a pretty black color, meaning it's pretty saturated. It's not 100% black. It's not the same black as your background, but it's close. So we're going to start with black. I'm going to use a much smaller brush. This is just a nice rounded brush, and I can add a little water to my paint. I want to just make sure that I have a tip on my brush. It is a tree. These things don't have to be perfect, but unlike this motion, that's not how they are. They are horizontal across the tree. And so we can just make some little dashy elements. Putting a slight curve in it because it's on a rounded tree. And if you would want, you can always come back to those lines. And if your brush is too big or you can't get a fine enough line, a Sharpie marker would also work beautifully to add some lines in there. And that's going to give you definitely more the characteristic of a birch tree. Well, I think that we have filled our time slot, maybe even have gone a little bit over. You guys have done a tremendous job on creating an abstract piece and in addition, a more realistic landscape.